Okay, so things are happening in the world right now that it would be wrong for us to completely ignore in favor of the usual lighter news that we cover, but it would also be wrong to present ourselves as any kind of experts on the very sensitive subject of Israel and Palestine. It is not something that we have the time, energy, expertise, or even desire to wade into too deeply.
This is supposed to be a fun show.
And pretty much any stance that we take on this topic is going to make at least a few of our viewers very, very mad.
Yeah.
But we are nevertheless going to wade into this topic, specifically because the discussion around it online and even in the news media has been, at best, horribly one-sided, and at worst, just straight-up bloodthirsty disinformation in service of justifying further loss of life at a massive scale.
So the basic facts, if you've managed to completely avoid what's going on, is that the Palestinian group Hamas launched an attack on Saturday originating in Gaza and extending several miles into the surrounding areas of Israel. Hundreds of Israeli civilians and active-duty military personnel have been killed in the attacks, and Israel has responded by bombing in and around Gaza, killing hundreds of Palestinians. Beyond those basic facts, though, things get very muddy, both in terms of misinformation and unsupported rumors being intentionally or unintentionally spread. And in terms of just how Western governments and Western news media have framed not just these incidents, but the entire conflict going back decades. There's decades of context and facts that go into all of this.
And if you consume even mostly reliable media, you're still getting not exactly the clearest picture, I'd say. Mm-hmm. Unless you really, really dig into this, you're probably seeing it from a skewed perspective. Or you're seeing it from no perspective at all, and this is the first you're hearing about it, and it's a lot to take in.
Yes, for very justified reasons. Emotions are extremely high. There is a lot of screaming and fighting on social media. You don't have to get involved in it. You can sit back and listen. That's what I've been doing over the past couple of days. It's been an extremely rough weekend. I've seen things online that I have experienced throughout decades of existing online, and some of it's the worst shit that I've ever seen, and it's taken its toll on me, as I'm assuming it's taken its toll on you, and this is all bad.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with waiting at least a little bit for at least the dust to kind of settle here. It's just a lot happening.
Yeah.
But before we get into it, though, we want to be absolutely clear about a few things. First of all, criticism of Israel is not criticism of Jewish people as a whole. It is not anti-Semitism. And in fact, some of the strongest voices condemning the Israeli government are Jewish and or Israeli. And secondly, and conversely, criticism of Hamas is not criticism of the Palestinian people as a whole. Equating Jews with Israel and Palestinians with Hamas is at the heart of the most deranged takes coming out of these events, and both are bad. But the views equating Palestinians and Hamas are definitely getting more mainstream airtime, and it's also pretty much the official Israeli military policy.
And it's easy to see why your friends, family, and other people are posting extremely emotional things, because the brutality of what has been seen over the weekend is undeniable. And there is brutality, a lot happening. Yeah. Entire apartment buildings.
Israel is bombing the shit out of Gaza. Entire families are being wiped out. Innocent people who had nothing to do with these attacks. A common mainstream viewpoint that we're seeing a lot of that's fucking sickening is that Hamas's attacks on Israeli civilians are completely unacceptable. Okay, I agree with that. Mm-hmm. And therefore, we must all support Israel as it kills Palestinian civilians.
Yeah, another popular viewpoint seems to be that this is an ancient conflict with tremendous nuance and complexity. And that's also a bit bullshit. But the truth is that the grievances at the heart of this conflict started in 1947, but even more specifically, they stem from 2007, when the Gaza blockade began, effectively isolating Gaza and severely limiting its access to basic goods and utilities. It's also not a holy war. Hamas is not ISIS, despite the official Israel Twitter account repeatedly claiming that it is. This conflict is way less about religion than it is about the material reality of Palestinians living under a system that has widely been compared to apartheid in South Africa, with Gaza described as the world's largest open-air prison. Another thing worth pointing out is that Gaza and the West Bank, the two parts of Israel that Palestinians are confined to, are geographically isolated from each other, and at this point are two totally different situations. Hamas is mostly in charge of Gaza, while the Palestinian Authority, aka Fatah, is mostly in charge in the West Bank. At this point, this conflict is confined to the area around Gaza, though it could definitely extend to the West Bank as things continue.
Yeah, and the situation in the West Bank definitely influences Gaza and vice versa, but they're two very different things. They're both areas that were captured in the many wars that Israel has fought to defend itself over the decades. Gaza, is basically a giant refugee camp. The West Bank was supposed to just be, well, they were like, we'll figure this out at some point. But Israel, please don't go in there, just don't send settlers in there to move in. Mm-hmm. I'm the UN. Please don't do that. And they fucking did. And that often, in a lot of cases, involves just going up to someone's house and saying, this is my house now.
Yeah. And this is why it was also frustrating over the weekend seeing responses from Western media and Western politicians telling the people who don't support Hamas you better leave Gaza.
They can't.
No.
They can't go anywhere.
So,
and people are like, oh, well, they can go to Egypt, or they can go, like, a thing that, like, really needs to be said is that the Palestinians don't have any friends, even in the surrounding countries. A big reason for the Arab-Israeli war in the 1940s was that all of the countries surrounding Israel were like, fuck, we're going to have to take in 1 million refugees. Mm-hmm. Let's do a war to avoid that. They don't want these people. And Egypt has been very cooperative with Israel in keeping them confined there. So they can't leave. There's no escape. They don't have bomb shelters either. There's Wolf Blitzer was talking to someone in a hospital there. Like,
shouldn't you go to the bomb shelter?
Yeah, I heard about a bomb. Shouldn't you go to the bomb shelter? She's like, we don't have a bomb shelter.
Yeah.
Anyways, another common talking point is that since the people of Gaza elected Hamas to represent them, well, they're not so innocent. They're simply reaping what they sowed when Israel counterattacks them. And here's the liberal leftist Wall Street Journal from way back in 2009. Surveying the wreckage of a neighbor's bungalow hit by a Palestinian rocket, retired Israeli official Avner Cohen traces the missile's trajectory back to an enormous, stupid mistake made 30 years ago. Hamas, to my great regret, is Israel's creation, says Mr. Cohen, a Tunisian-born Jew who worked in Gaza for more than 2 decades. Responsible for religious affairs in the region until 1994, Mr. Cohen watched the Islamist movement take shape, muscle aside secular Palestinian rivals, and then morph into what is today Hamas, a militant group that is sworn to Israel's destruction. Instead of trying to curb Gaza's Islamists from the outset, Israel for years tolerated and, in some cases, encouraged them as a counterweight to the secular nationalists of the Palestine Liberation Organization and its dominant faction, Yasser Arafat's Fatah. Israel cooperated with a crippled, half-blind cleric named Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, even as he was laying the foundations for what would become Hamas. Sheikh Yassin continues to inspire militants today. During the recent war in Gaza, Hamas fighters confronted Israeli troops with Yassins, primitive rocket-propelled grenades named in honor of the cleric.
So, yeah, that's the Wall Street Journal, not exactly a leftist, anti-Zionist source. And here's the Times of Israel, one of Israel's biggest online news outlets, with an op-ed published this week that explains further. For years, the various governments led by Benjamin Netanyahu took an approach that divided power between the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, bringing Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas to his knees while making moves that propped up the Hamas terror group. The idea was to prevent Abbas or anyone else in the Palestinian Authority's West Bank government from advancing toward the establishment of a Palestinian state. Thus, amid this bid to impair Abbas, Hamas was upgraded from a mere terror group to an organization with which Israel held indirect negotiations via Egypt, and one that was allowed to receive infusions of cash from abroad. Most of the time, Israeli policy was to treat the Palestinian Authority as a burden and Hamas as an asset. Far-right MK Bezalel Smotrich, now the finance minister in the hardline government and leader of the religious Zionism party, said so himself in 2015. According to various reports, Netanyahu made a similar point at the Likud faction meeting in early 2018 when he was quoted as saying that those who oppose a Palestinian state should support the transfer of funds to Gaza because maintaining the separation between the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and Hamas in Gaza would prevent the establishment of a Palestinian state. While Netanyahu does not make these kind of statements publicly or officially, his words are in line with the policy that he implemented.
He admitted. So yeah, within Israel this week, there's actually been quite a lot of blame for the current situation laid at the feet of Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's prime minister, who was already facing years of criticism for alleged corruption and for steering Israel's government in an increasingly hardline authoritarian direction. And yeah, also within Israel, you do have people that are openly opposed to the status quo.
Yeah.
But what's happening in Israel it's horrific. It's indefensible. Can't say that enough. It is.
Yeah, we have to keep
bad.
reiterating that what happened this weekend is not excusable. This was
No.
brutality. It was, and the reports, and a lot of which, some are confirmed, some are unconfirmed. It is a very thick fog of war happening right now,
Yeah.
especially, which we'll get into, how easily misinformation and disinformation is being spread online at a rate that I don't know if we've seen or that I can remember in any recent history.
No, it's a clusterfuck. It's bad.
Yeah. So.
But yeah, I mean, this is obviously indefensible. But it is also the natural outcome of Israeli policy. The Gaza blockade has been in effect for 17 years, and the median age in Gaza is around 18. So, in other words, the median Gaza resident has never known any life other than under blockade, trapped in one of the most densely populated places on Earth, living in poverty with little reliable access to food, clean water, or medicine, only getting around 4 hours of electricity per day. If that was your entire life experience, and you'd seen friends and family wiped out by indiscriminate bombings over the years, you'd probably be really fucking mad. And you'd be very susceptible to extremist movements that claim that they can do something about it. If someone's entire life experience is being treated as if their life has little value, that will probably affect that person's ability to see the value of the lives of the people on the other side of the wall where the rockets are being launched from. And that obviously goes both ways, but it's impossible to look at the casualty numbers on either side of this conflict and claim that both sides have suffered equally.
We should also probably address a talking point that's always popular among Americans whenever large-scale unrest breaks out. I support Palestine, but they should fight for their freedom the right way through nonviolence like Martin Luther King. And yeah, compared to the indefensible slaughter of civilians, of course that would be better. Gazans literally already tried that. In 2018 and 2019, they peacefully marched into the no man's land around Gaza to protest for an end to the Gaza blockade. And Israeli snipers killed hundreds of them and injured thousands more. There was international outcry, at least for a little bit, but it didn't do shit to change fucking anything. None of us want to really think about what we would do if we were oppressed and peaceful protest was a dead end. But it's never pretty. Ireland, South Africa, Algeria, Haiti, Nat Turner's slave revolt, John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry. These are all conflicts where the side that was absolutely morally in the right did fucking terrible, indefensible things against their oppressors. But that doesn't invalidate the cause that they were fighting for, because war is always hell. This is the... I know a lot of you out there didn't live through the post 9/11 world.
Well, we're seeing how Part 2 Electric Boogaloo.
And some of you were
sucks.
maybe too young to be fully cognizant of what that experience was like. But it was grouping people up and being extremely racist towards people that had nothing to do with the attacks that happened on 9/11.
Yeah, no, the first hate crime after 9/11 wasn't even a fucking Muslim Arab, it was a Sikh. Yeah, shit got really fucking... I mean, not that it's really gotten good for Arabs in this country, but it was bad.
Yeah.
Very bad for a long time after 9/11. Because, it just got fucking bloodthirsty.
Yeah.
It was, I mean, a common thing you would hear, from just in real life, is we should nuke the entire Middle East. Just flatten that entire part of the world.
And you're already seeing
popular
calls for that online across various accounts, talking heads, and otherwise.
And again, in a similar redux of things, completely failing to take into account that Al-Qaeda and the Taliban came into existence in part thanks to U.S. Foreign policy.
Yeah, this is all, it's all extremely bad. Again, I hate to keep reiterating this, but if you've been online in the past couple of days, you understand the discourse here. But what happened this weekend was extremely gruesome, bad, and inexcusable.
But anyway, now's the part where we pivot into talking about how this situation is the first real test of Twitter under Elon Musk's role as CEO in, quickly spreading information about ongoing, rapidly changing events and how it is failing spectacularly. I mean, it's failing about as badly as we would have guessed, but holy shit.
Yeah.
I mean, if you'll recall, one of the first times that Twitter really demonstrated its value as a real-time information source for global events was during the Arab Spring protests in the early 2010s. A decade and some change later, and Twitter is mostly serving to rapidly amplify misinformation and speculation that is immediately seized upon as hard fact by the most divisive and dishonest people on the platform, who are, of course, being algorithmically boosted.
And then that's being served to people who are attempting to share things in what I would assume is good faith, but are being
just trying to figure out what the fuck is going on.
Duped. There's Arma 3 footage that keeps popping up and keeps getting tagged as if it's real.
Yeah.
That's just one example.
I mean, Twitter...
There's footage from 5-10 years ago that's being used as if it was footage that was taken today or yesterday. It is a cesspool of disinformation right now.
Under its old leadership, I mean, it would have still been a shit show regardless, just inherently, but they did have a pretty robust team of people that would get into action when events like this were going on.
They've spent
to curate actual, verifiable content, and they don't have fucking shit
almost
anymore.
An entire year dismantling any and all guardrails that would have attempted to prevent any how bad it actually has been for the past couple of days.
So yeah, it's been a shit show, and according to people who research this stuff for a living, it has been worse than ever before. Mm-hmm. Here's Wired.
While all major world events are now accompanied almost instantly by a deluge of disinformation aimed at controlling the narrative, the scale and speed at which disinformation was being seeded about the Israel-Hamas conflict is unprecedented, particularly on X. For many reasons, this is the hardest time I've ever had covering a crisis on here. Justin Peden, a OSINT researcher from Alabama known online as the Intel Crab, posted on X. Credible links are now photos. On-the-ground news outlets struggle to reach audiences without an expensive blue checkmark. Xenophobic goons are boosted by the platform's CEO. End times, folks. When Peden covered the escalation in Gaza in 2021, the sources he was seeing in his feed were from people on the ground or credible news agencies. This weekend, he says, verified content or primary sources were virtually impossible to find on X. It's getting incredibly hard to find people that actually live in Palestine or in southern Israel, Peden tells Wired. It's been incredibly hard to find their preliminary information and share their videos and photos. You have this perfect storm where on the ground, preliminary sources are not being amplified, especially those that maybe don't speak English, which is a large majority of the users in that area.
It continues. Boosted by the algorithm that promotes users willing to pay X $8 a month for a premium subscription, posts from those with a blue checkmark shot to the top of news feeds for people seeking information about the conflict. Rather than being shown verified and fact-checked information, X users were presented with video game footage passed off as footage of a Hamas attack, and images of fireworks celebrations in Algeria presented as Israeli strikes on Hamas. There were faked pictures of soccer superstar Ronaldo holding the Palestinian flag, while a 3-year-old video from the Syrian civil war repurposed to look like it was taken this weekend. As a result, Peden says that he and his fellow OSINT researchers have to spend their time debunking years-old content rather than verifying and sharing real footage from the conflict. Many of these videos and images racked up hundreds of thousands of views and engagements. While some later featured a note from X's decimated community fact-checking system, many more remained untouched. And as Elon Musk has repeatedly done in recent incidents, the platform's CEO made the situation much worse.
For following the war in real time, @War Monitors and @Scent Defender are good, Musk wrote in a post to his 150 million followers on Sunday morning. Both the accounts Musk referenced are well-known spreaders of disinformation. For example, both accounts spread the lie that there had been an explosion near the White House in May, a story that made the U.S. stock market briefly plummet before it was debunked.
That was a fucking AI-generated image,
yeah.
Too, which...
Many users also pointed out that the War Monitors account had a history of posting anti-Semitic comments on X. Last year, the account replied to a post from Ye, formerly Kanye West, thanking the rapper and adding, "The overwhelming majority of people in the media and banks are Zionists," while telling another X user in June to go worship a Jew, lil bro.
Yikes. Handpicked by the man in charge. I also love that I did this, and then the article did this, incorrectly referred to Elon Musk as the CEO, which he technically is not, but...
Linda Yaccarino is the CEO, and she is already canceling every appearance that she had scheduled.
Yeah. Anyway, you can always count on Elon Musk to take a shitty situation and personally make it even worse. But the examples of disinformation about the war just keep coming. Here's Bloomberg with some more specific examples. As news of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict began to emerge Saturday, a far-right political commentator published a post on X that claimed to show video evidence of Palestinian militants going door-to-door and killing Israeli citizens. Imagine if this was happening in your neighborhood, to your family, said the commentator, Ian Miles Chong, who has frequently interacted with Musk on X. Over 3 days, the short video gained nearly 50 million likes, shares, and comments. It was viewed 12.7 million times on X. Later, a community note was attached to the post noting that the video showed Israeli law enforcement, not members of the Palestinian military group Hamas. But it wasn't clear how far the misleading post spread before the correction, and the post remains live on the platform. And there's been a few examples of this.
Jamie Lee Curtis posted a photo and had to delete it because she was,
been multiple examples of showing images from Palestine and being like, look what's happening in Israel.
Yeah.
It's just, there was one like, look at these children in cages. Like, these children were literally in an Israeli prison.
This is wild. That is also the problem with a lot of this stuff being heightened as if it is true by blue check marks and their algorithm, because you have, I assume that Jamie Lee Curtis's heart is in the right place, but she's also not an expert on Middle Eastern conflict and wants to support Israel, and is doing so by sharing images she thought were real. In fact, she was being misled.
I just wish there was a little more self-reflection.
Yes.
And it turns out that the horrible things that you're pointing out are actually happening to the other side of the conflict. And, you would hope that would make you approach the topic with a little more nuance, but I don't know.
Anyways, here's a few more. A few hours later, a paid X account with an anonymous handle weighed in with a false post. And there it is, the account said. The U.S. is sending $8 billion worth of military aid to Israel. The post included a screenshot of what appeared to be a statement from the White House authorizing the aid to Israel, but no such statement has ever appeared on the U.S. government's website. The dateline and details in the screenshot were manipulated, copying a White House statement in July that announced financial aid for Ukraine, according to an independent misinformation researcher who posted a fact check online. A community note was also added to the post on X, but the false claim was repeated in at least 1,400 other posts on the platform, not all of them with a label appended, according to research compiled by NewsGuard, a group that documents viral online posts as part of its work to assess the quality of websites and news outlets.
And there was also, this is being funded by Iran. It's like, there's no evidence for that at all. And also, they're being funded by the money that Joe Biden gave to Iran. And it's like, no, actually, that money's been sitting frozen in a South Korean bank this whole time. They haven't touched it. Anyway, here's more from the article. Around the same time, an account purporting to represent the Taliban posted on X claiming without evidence that the group was asking the governments of Iran, Iraq, and Jordan for passage to join up with Hamas. The unsubstantiated claim collected 2.5 million views on X and spread widely on Meta Platform Inc.'s Facebook through an article published by The Gateway Pundit, a far-right website that often spreads conspiracy theories, which picked up the unproven claim. On Facebook, The Gateway Pundit's article was shared 1,600 times, reaching as many as 440,000 people on the social network, according to CrowdTangle, a Meta-owned social media analysis tool. But Michael Kugelman, director of the South Asia Institute at the Wilson Center, a nonpartisan think tank, said there was no reason to believe the claim from the account is true.
Yeah,
people eat this shit up like catnip. Again, the Middle East is not a fucking monolith. The relationships between the countries themselves and then the groups within those countries, Americans love to see the Middle East as terrorist land.
It's literally the image of the American mind cannot comprehend this image, and it's just an image of the Middle East.
Yeah, the international relations between the countries of the Middle East are very complex, and that is also true for the insurgent groups and terror groups in the Middle East. They kind of all fucking hate each other. ISIS and Hamas famously, nothing nice to say about each other.
And the situation has been so bad that the European Union has issued a warning to Elon Musk, reminding him that under EU law, he has a responsibility to actively clean up the disinformation on his platform, and that he faces some pretty stiff fines if he doesn't. We should also be clear, though, that while Twitter has played a major role in spreading disinformation about this conflict, the news media is not doing a great job either. Specific claims about especially egregious atrocities are being reported as fact, and if you manage to actually trace the sourcing, it often just stems from single offhand remarks from people on the ground in Israel who say they heard about it from someone else. It's very hard to get a factual picture of what is going on.
And it's usually, it's horrific stuff I literally cannot say on here, but like claims that are just like, wow, that is a absolute evil. And I'm not saying that all of these claims are false, but it's just all it takes is one person saying like, oh, I heard that this is happening. And it just goes around the world and it gets sourced so many times that
there is no original source.
Yeah.
Again, just gut-wrenching, horrific stuff. No excuse. People are widely reported as being dead or turning up alive. There is still a tremendous fog of war over everything that's happened, and we're seeing some of our news media's worst impulses at play when it comes to reporting verifiable facts. In general, you really got to approach the news coming out of Israel and Gaza right now with a healthy degree of skepticism, because you're going to have to.
It's obviously
really
too much to ask for the general population, but like I know a lot of people who should know better are falling into the trap.
Emotions, I've never seen it as bad as it is, and justifiably so. People's emotions are ratcheted up by what they're seeing. It is understandable that people are jumping the gun on every response, statement, and everything, and that's generally a bad idea, but I understand why they're so worked up about it.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for Elon Musk to, at some point, forget what happened. Not forget what happened this weekend, but look at the numbers from October and be like, numbers are up on X.
Engagement
at an all-time high.
Yeah.
Must just be that college football everyone's talking about. Thank you, Deion Sanders.
Also, another thing with the media that's always worth mentioning is, like, almost no one has dedicated boots-on-the-ground reporters in Gaza. For understandable reasons. It was a fucking dangerous job. But, like, I think it was, like, Reuters had reporters there. Their building got fucking blown up 2 years ago when that was going on. So I don't know if they still do. But it's, like, Reuters, AP, and Al Jazeera, I think, are, like, the only international outlets that have any sort of, like, on-the-ground coverage. So when you don't have that, that makes it so much harder to report on what's actually happening. You basically have to take anything the Israeli government tells you as fact. And they have a history of not always telling the truth.
One of the more infuriating things, based entirely on the Twitter side of things, or the X side of things, is that under Elon Musk's guidance, people have been incentivized to spread whatever gets views, no matter if it's true or not. If it gets views and replies, that is making them money. So it is in their best financial interest, people like Ian Miles Chong, whether that is true or not, to be putting all of that out there because it is visceral, insane content.
It's a clickbait MLM.
Yeah.
You too could earn thousands of dollars a month spreading disinformation.
It's infuriating.
Anyways, obviously, this video, there's zero chance it's being monetized. You can't talk about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
advertisers don't like it. I actually
understand. Yeah,
this episode was supposed to be sponsored by some of our sponsors. We decided they probably wouldn't like their ads appearing on the show.
It's very awkward for us to try to do that. It would be
Hey guys, speaking of
so we do want to thank channel members. Because thank you for offsetting what we're doing here. But let's close this episode out on some more light stuff, so that you're not carrying additional baggage around. Everyone is it's not a great time.
Some of the news, the typical stuff that will just annoy you and not make you weep for the fate of humanity.
Yes. So look, let's talk about Elon Musk
again.
That old punching bag. He is the main character after all. Sadly, he does pop up in every news story in the world, even the conflict overseas. So one of his character traits that we've seen demonstrated time and time again is that Elon Musk seems to absolutely love getting sued.
Ooh, sued again.
So here's another lawsuit for the ever-growing pile, and this one comes from Musk's mortal enemies down at the SEC. Here's The Verge. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, is suing Elon Musk over his refusal to testify in an investigation into Musk's purchase of Twitter stock in 2022. According to the SEC's complaint, Musk was scheduled to appear for testimony on September 15th after receiving a subpoena. However,